G'day, Dan McCarthy, KAP candidate for Leichhardt. This article on page 5 of the weekend Cairns Post has got to be the most embarrassing example of political grandstanding fail ever seen in Cairns. The outgoing federal member for Leichhardt is desperately trying to claim a win on an issue that he's actually been actively working against. But it amounts to a fake win, and it's giving false hope to the people of Cairns. I'm not sure if it amounts to lying, deception, or just complete incompetence and hypocrisy, but it surely stinks. Now let me explain. I've been dealing with the Home Affairs Minister's office for some time on this, and I've been dealing with the port issue and trying to get our port dredged for a number of years. I know what I'm talking about on this issue. The facts are our port has been listed as a critical infrastructure asset, but that means absolutely nothing for the growth of our port. Absolutely zero. In April this year, new federal legislation, the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, listed several Australian ports, including Cairns, Townsville, Darwin and Broome, as critical infrastructure assets. But this does not mean that they will be developed. It does not mean the ports will be developed. It simply requires the owners of those ports, and in our case, Ports North, to report any changes to the Commonwealth Secretary of Home Affairs. That's all. So that's fail number one. Mr. Ench further claims that the state government quietly snuck through strategic port listing. Well, that's absolutely rubbish. In actual fact, it was back in 1994, 24 years ago, that the Queensland State Government designated 15 strategic ports around Queensland. But this is mainly for the land use planning. It does not mythically cause an expansion to the port. That's failing tick number 2. The third claim the outgoing member makes is that the port has been designated under the Maritime and Offshore Facilities Securities Act. This also does not mean any further dredging in our Cairns Port. This was actually put in place in 2003, but the Reef 2050 plan ran roughshod right over the top of it, and it put a stop to the future of dredging for our Cairns Port. That's fail tick number 3. Probably the most embarrassing in the exclusive story is where Warren Ench says, and I quote, "Put simply, under Queensland legislation, the Sustainable Ports Development Act, a priority port cannot be developed." That's what Mr. Ench said. Guess what? He's absolutely 100% wrong. That is false, incorrect, and it is a colossal failure. Number 4. The federal member doesn't have a clue what the hell he's talking about in relation to our port. It is completely contrary to the facts. The 4 bulk mineral export ports of Townsville, Gladstone, Abbott Point and Hay Point were designated priority ports so they could be developed as required. We all remember back in 2015 when those 4 ports had their categories upgraded to priority ports, Cairns missed out. At the time, the KAP put up an amendment to include Cairns as a priority port so it could be expanded. But thanks to the LNP ganging up with their Labor and Green mates, they all voted against the KAP amendment and Cairns missed out. That's a huge fail and tick number 5. The real problem here, the elephant in the room, is the Reef 2050 plan, which Warren Ench and his greeny mates snuck through Parliament. That's been inflicted on our community and our regional economy, effectively putting a lid on our growth into the future. The Reef 2050 plan clearly states that once this current downscale dredging project has been completed, there is no more capital works that can take place in our port indefinitely into the future. The Reef 2050 plan specifically bans all future capital works in our channel. This is the real and the only contribution Warren Ench has made to our channel. That's fail tick number 6. This is why it's so critical that we amend the Reef 2050 plan to allow for future capital works in our port. Finally, it needs to be acknowledged that there has been at no point from the outgoing member for Leichhardt, there's been no talk, no offering of any money from the federal government. The new Prime Minister this year committed $75 million, not to Cairns, but to the Port of Townsville to further expand their port. 11 times the size of the project we have here in Cairns. A quarter of the size of what we really need. And there's been zero from the federal government for the Port of Cairns. Fail tick number 7. It's just not good enough. North Queensland deserves better.